You all sent me in your watch collections, and today I'm making more recommendations on what you should buy next. Today, we're talking about an incredible and I think pretty unknown Vacheron, IWC, and a little bit more mainstream, but really underappreciated, I think, by men, Cartier wristwatch. Today's collection review is sponsored by our friends over at Blokes. More on them later. And today we're talking about a Theo and Harris fan, Nevo. Nevo sent his collection in with a whole bunch of you over the last week or so. We brought back the collection review series with my dad's watch collection. If you haven't already watched that video, go back and watch it. It wasn't a perfect video, but it was good, and I was glad to be back, and I'm glad to be doing these. So Nevo's got a heck of a watch collection here, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, really great stuff. I'm going to run through these watches really quickly so you see what they are, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about them each one at a time, and then we're going to go into the big questions here. What is maybe taking up space? What does Nevo really want? And are there any watches that Nevo maybe doesn't know exist or hasn't paid enough time paying attention to that could be the answer to all of his, dreams and prayers and wishes? And by the end of today's episode and conversation, I'm going to make a recommendation on how Nevo can get to his Grail watch, which is a really beautiful Patek Philippe. It's $50,000, which is over his budget, but his budget's really big too, right? And I think with a couple of good pieces of advice, it's actually within reach. And then once within reach, you ask yourself, just because I can do it, should I? Today, I'm wearing a Omega Seamaster vintage watch, burgundy dial, burgundy bezel matching, absolutely fantastic, a sort of civilian diver watch, just a beautiful, comfortable piece, perfect sizing with a big, big crown, signed Omega. This watch is available in the Theo and Harris watch shop. Go ahead and take a look at this and all the other stuff we have over there, including a really beautiful Tiffany Datejust as well, which is just fantastic. So head on over there. Let's get into today's conversation. Number one, a Nomos Ludwig Neomatic 36. Number two, a Cartier Curation from the 1940s. Number three, a Cartier Tank Paris dial extra plat. A Reverso Tribute rose gold with a silver dial. A Breguet 3137, a Rolex Day-Date in white gold with a silver dial and oyster bracelet with a hidden clasp, a Cartier Ballon Bleu in yellow gold on bracelet, and a Rolex Sprite that he only recently got from an authorized dealer, not a gray market, and he wanted to make that clear. So those are the watches we'll be talking about today, and the conversation will go into what is next. By the end of today's video, I'll make this recommendation as to what Nevo should be buying next. But now let's take some time and go through these watches and what I think about them. Well, let's start off with the Nomos Ludwig Neomatic 36. This watch, frankly, most of these watches here, because Nevo is clearly a fantastic collector, but this watch does have my attention. Why? Why a Nomos Ludwig Neomatic? Why? Why? It doesn't fit in with the rest of the collection. It's got nothing in common with the Cartiers or nothing in common with the JLCs or the Breguet, God knows, or the Day-Date. I mean, this watch has nothing in common with any of these other pieces. In fact, it's the Nomos, I think the Cartier Ballon Bleu, that stand out as kind of bizarre in this collection. I bet there's something of a story there. Maybe it was his first watch. Nomos is a fantastic brand that gets people into mechanical watchmaking. Is that it? It could also be, maybe it could have been a gift, something of a symbol between two people. This could be, I could imagine, I've made recommendations for watches like this from Nomos between spouses and things like that. I'm just interested. There's got to be more to the story here, because the other watches, the other places that Nevo has chosen to allocate his resources, they're just not with a Nomos Neomatic Ludwig. That being said, fantastic watch. The Neomatics, the automatics are great. 36 millimeters is fantastic. I'm a big Nomos fan. I think that the Orion is incredible. The Tetra is incredible. I have a Tetra in black. I also have, well, my dad has, I gifted it to him for Christmas, a Nomos World Time. So I'm a big Nomos fan. There's no doubt about that. But interesting piece. The next one here, and we'll have a lot more to say about this later on in the discussion, but is the Cartier Curation. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly, and if I'm not, I am truly apologetic to all of my Francophiles out there. I am doing my best, because my natural inclination is to call it a Colescent. So anyway, 1940s, bizarre. This is wild. This is an expression or a demonstration that Nevo understands Cartier, that Cartier is not just the Tank Louis. Okay, most Cartier lovers don't even know the Tank Normal exists, even though it's the original, right? Most Cartier people think the Crash is about as weird and wild and obscure as Cartier gets. No. No, 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 no. Cartier has such a long history of bizarre pieces. The Chinoise is a great example of just a bizarre Cartier piece. How many variations of the Centre are there, right? Just so many. Thickness, size, everything. Cartier is a bizarre company, and the production numbers were so small. Cartier produced so few watches. I mean, many years over the 20th century, Cartier was making 7 tanks, for God's sakes, 5, 9, very much a lot in common there with Breguet, right? Very different in approach, right? Breguet was doing master complication and a lot of commission and things like this, whereas Cartier was always very simple and elegant. But we're talking about being allocated and produced for only the most exclusive and poshest and wealthiest and most influential and tasteful people in the world. That's Cartier, and that's what this is. This is a bizarre piece. It functions in a bit of a slide. It has a sliding mechanism there. I don't know how many exist, but there are very, very few. This watch, 5 years ago probably was a $5,000 watch or a $3,000 watch that nobody wanted, and today, I mean, it's somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000, probably to the right buyer. It could even be more. Some recent Cartier auction results have seen prices that are, shattering. Truly insane, right? We've seen quartz Cartiers sell for upwards of $60,000, which, by the way, there's your answer, ladies and gentlemen. If you're, considering getting a quartz Cartier and you think that that's a bad thing to do because the watchman told you it was bad, clearly the collector's market is affirming the opposite, that the beauty of Cartier is in the design. The mechanical, watches are fantastic, of course, God knows, but Cartier is a design house, really. So anyway, fantastic piece, bizarre, kind of made popular, and I'm using that word very lightly, by Tyler, the Creator, who recently wore it about 2 years ago, I think, on a magazine. He's a big Cartier guy, and I think he's played a large role in its renaissance, or as the French would say, renaissance. I'm trying to overcorrect my French. Number 3, the Cartier Tank Paris Style Extra Plat. Extra Plat is extra thin. This is a fantastic watch, elongated crown, not going to get much better. Yeah, Cartier tanks don't really get much better. I also have this watch, not in a personal collection. It's a watch that I have for the shop that I haven't listed yet. Fantastic piece. No reason to sell this watch. The value is going up and up and up. I don't think that Cartier Tank Louis get much better than this. I think that this is about as good as they get. Now, if the Cartier Tank Louis is not your preferred Cartier, and it is not mine, I'm a normal guy. If we're talking about Cartier tanks, then that's different. But if we are talking about Louis, this is about as good as it gets. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a fantastic watch. Its condition is great. Yellow gold. I think this is just a fabulous piece, right? This is just a fabulous piece. Next, I think a very unsung watch, a watch that doesn't get enough attention, or a class of watch that doesn't get enough attention, is the Reverso Tribute Rose Gold. This is a thin watch. Proportions are really, really great. Rose gold, silver dial, absolutely stunning. Kind of no frills in the sense that there's no complication, there's nothing, no distraction, but precious metal Reverso is not typical. Most Reversos are not precious metal. Most people do not opt for them. Precious metal Reversos are kind of expensive, right? You're talking, upwards of $20,000. So at that point, a lot of people choose to allocate that money elsewhere. And I think that that's oftentimes a miss, because these watches, I think, are better and more interesting than their competitors, like the Patek Calatrava. I think this is a better watch than a Patek Calatrava. If you're talking about solid gold dress watches, this is better. I think it's more interesting. I think it's more niche. And I think it's more inherently, it's more sporty, so it's more versatile, but it's still never going to be too sporty for any formal attire. This is as good as it gets. I think it's as good as it gets as far as, Reversos are concerned. Of course, without getting into crazy complication and enameling and things like that. But just a fantastic watch that I think doesn't get enough attention. And by the way, if you look on the secondary market, they do depreciate quite a bit. Once they take that retail depreciation, that first depreciation hit, they stabilize. And I think they're really safe investments, but safe places to put money. But I think they represent a ton of value. Speaking of a ton of value, Breguet. I mean, you're not getting much better than Breguet when it comes to value if you're really, really into watchmaking. This is a reference 3137, complicated piece, got a lot of instrumentation all over the dial here, but the sizing is compact and beautiful. I've always opted away from the classiques with all this complication. I always found them a little bit busy and weird, but I think I'm starting to understand that that's the point, and that's what makes it cool. That if we look back at the history of Breguet and we look at the people that Breguet, the man, Abraham Louis Breguet, was making watches for, and the whole point was overcomplication. That was the goal, that this is actually completely in line with the tradition and history of the brand. This is it's kind of like picking up where he left off in many ways, in wristwatch form, of course. Really, really big fan of this watch. I love Breguet. I have a Breguet tradition that I haven't worn in many years, but I love it. I think it's one of the great watches. I think that Breguet truly, on the pre-owned market specifically, is the best. I mean, maybe the best value out there. If your budget is between, $7,000 and $20,000, you'd be very, very hard pressed to find a better collection of watches, assuming you're okay with, more formal, watches. The coin edge case sides are incredible. The hand guilloche dials are incredible. The movements so thin, the enameling, the best. Today's episode is sponsored by our friends over at Blokes. Blokes Wellness is dedicated to enhancing men's health by optimizing hormones and providing in-depth health insights. Whether you're feeling fatigued or overweight or just simply not yourself on the inside, Blokes is there to help. They strive to restore our vitality, our well-being, giving us and me, I'm a Blokes customer, a more optimized life through a comprehensive lab test and personalized health insights. When I started using Blokes, I was so relieved by how easy it was, how straightforward the process was, right? The input system was quick, it was gentle, it was thorough. I just kind of filled out very candidly what I may be feeling, right? How I may feel as a man in this exact moment. And what they came back to me with was such a personalized response in their insights into my health. And they were delivered right to my fingertips, allowing me to, take charge of my journey forward. My thing was fatigue. I do struggle with that. I work a ton. I have executive, just stress. My brain's everywhere. And I wondered if there were maybe solutions that could help me get through that in a more healthy, informed manner. That's what I trusted them with. And I'm glad I did. More people are curious about what's going on in their bodies, and Blokes is there to help us. I really couldn't possibly recommend you head on over to Blokes now anymore, and that's sincere. And Blokes is offering 15% off site-wide. All you have to do is go to blokes.co/Theo Harris and use my code Theo Harris at checkout. Again, I really recommend it. Head down below, use it, and we'll see you on over there. Thanks, Blokes. Rolex Day-Date. Wild watch. Ridiculous. I would never buy this watch. I think this is an absurd watch, and I love it. I love it because a Day-Date in this configuration, right? Smooth bezel, oyster bracelet. It's a sports watch. This is an OP. This is a precious metal oyster perpetual. It's the same idea. It is for the person that likes the simplicity of those watches and the sportiness of them, doesn't want the attention and the decadence of the classic Day-Date, but it doesn't want to wear a steel watch, has a lot of money and wants to spend it. Wild. I can't believe you have this watch. No one buys these watches. Nobody. They're kind of hard to sell, actually. But they're great. They're so neat. I would recommend these watches every day of the week. I'd recommend these watches to a lot of people that work in office environments. If you have a high income, or you are allocating a lot of money toward watches, but you're in an office environment and don't want to stand out too much, I think this was like a fantastic place to be. Especially if you're just in your own style, a little bit more casual. You're not as blingy. 36 millimeter oyster bracelet, Day-Date, smooth bezel is just, it's a total sleeper hit. And any watch guy that sees it is going to be like, oh shit, you know what you're talking about. And they also come in a multitude of dials. Like, there are a lot of dials you can get this watch in. You can go black, you can go cherry, you can go blue, you can go a lot of different ways here, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah, I think this is a fantastic watch. That Nevo, really, honestly, that and your Breguet together, 2-watch collection. That Breguet and the Cartier Curation, You're the most interesting watch collector whose collection I'm looking at the moment, right? But I really do mean this to pay you a remarkable compliment. You've done an amazing job building your collection. Like, legitimately, you have a lot of taste, which does make me wonder why you have a Cartier Bellon Bleu in solid gold. And this is a dialogue, everybody. I want this to be a dialogue, or this is the new iteration of this channel, the rebirth of this channel, and I want this to be a dialogue. This is a cool watch. It's a cool watch. It's Cartier Bellon Bleu in yellow gold and a bracelet. It's a really expensive watch. And this is the watch that people who didn't know anything about watches bought when it came out. This is the watch that was an entourage, right? You'd buy a Calibre or a Roadster and a Bellon Bleu in precious metal, and that's what you owned, and that's what you wore, because it's a gold Cartier. And it was kind of sporty, although soft lines, but still big. This is not a watch guy's watch. Why do you own it? I actually find it fascinating. I think it's kind of cool. I would wear one. I think it's wild. I think there are more watch guy Cartiers. A buddy of ours, a buddy of the company, my personal friend Peter, who we've done some videos with, a collection review, we'll link it down below, a while ago. He recently picked up a yellow gold Santos, medium size, full yellow with bracelet and everything. I think he paid below $30,000, and it's like a no-brainer, right? Way sportier than a Day-Date 40. Just a beautiful watch, right? I think he picked it up for like $27,000. A lot of money, of course, but that's more of a watch guy's watch. The Bellon Bleu has essentially been relegated into the, not as a trash bin of watch history. I just mean like what's the word? First of all, decidedly feminine, right? Bellon Bleu has become a woman's collection, I believe, almost entirely. Very successful collection, but a female collection. Again, I kind of like them, but it doesn't fit in your collection at all, and I'm wondering why you have it. Very much like the Nomos, as I said at the, inception of the video, the beginning of the video, inception. The inception of the video is when you sent me an email. I know what inception means. It's a movie. Leonardo DiCaprio, the Scarecrow from Batman. Bizarre watch, don't know why you have it. Tell me why you have it. I don't know why you have that or the Nomos. I'm interested. I'm not judging you. I mean, I am judging you, but not in a negative way. I'm interested. Why that watch? It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And last but not least, Rolex Sprite. I get it. Who doesn't want one Rolex sport model? And I think you have the right amount of Rolex sport models, and it's one. Not to say you can't have 4 and 5. God bless. I totally get it. Right? I totally get why you'd want a sub, and then a GMT, and Rolex makes perfect watches. But I'm definitely in the camp of pick one Rolex sport model and enjoy it. What are your thoughts on that? I know a lot of you have many, many, many. I know that. I have an eclectic, weird taste, so it's not for me. I have one. I have a GMT, and let's just say, for argument's sake, that it's not in stainless steel, but it looks like it is. Keep looking at Sam for affirmation that I'm funny. I like this watch a lot. I like that it's left-handed. I like the color combo. I like that it's weird, and I like the Jubilee. I think it's great. But I do think that one is the right number for Rolex sports models. But I also understand people have more, and many, many, many people have more. Rolex sports models become very easy to kind of accumulate and collect because they make so much sense. And they're expensive, but they're not that expensive in the world of luxury watches, right? I mean, they're $12,000 for argument's sake. A lot of money, guys. Way too much money for the time. It's ridiculous. No one needs any of these things. But there are many paths to go, and many people go into the high value path, and then you're deciding to choose between one $70,000 watch, which I know is insane, but it's very common, or I could just keep buying subs and GMTs and Daytonas, and I like it. I like the way the dealer treats me. I like wearing a Rolex. My dad wore a Rolex. I get it. A buddy of mine who's been on this channel many times said, and it's such a simple thing, and it's very profound. I think the most profound things are very simple. At the end of the day, it's all Rolex. And this is someone that owns many different independents and better and more important watches than any of his Rolexes. At the end of the day, you're going to, you wear your Rolex to, play with your kids on the beach. You're going to wear your Rolex to hang by the lake. You're going to wear your Rolex, doing whatever. Your kids are going to remember your Rolex because you wore it most often. It's the watch that is going to represent the most at the end of the day. You're going to pass down your Rolex, or you're going to pass down all your watches, but the Rolexes you pass down are the most meaningful watches you pass down. I think that's totally true. I wear my Piaget Polo way more than I wear my Rolex GMT. Way more. My Piaget Polo will be a watch probably that gets worn very little and means little compared to my GMT. One day. to my kids if I am lucky enough to have them. So anyway, please comment down below with your reasoning as to why you have multiple Rolex sports models, and if you don't, why you don't. And if it's because of money, then just say that too, because there's many things I don't own because of money. Now, let's get into the second part of this conversation, which is, I know that we're long-winded here, but I think that that's kind of the direction of these collection reviews. There's a temptation for me to make them shorter and kind of fun, but these are just long conversations I hope that you're enjoying. Long conversations remind me a hell of a lot of The Zero. If you're not a member of that, go ahead down below and join our podcast community where we release one long-form piece of content every week. It's always a video, and it's great. It's much more behind the scenes. And this week, we talked about my huge gay contingency in the Theo and Harris family, for which I am most grateful for, because they're the only community that has never betrayed me. So go over to The Zero and hear all about that and so much else, including an apartment tour. I've got a lot more art in here. So anyway, back to the conversation. I asked a couple of questions to Nevo, and here are the answers. So the first question was, what's the watch that doesn't get as much wear as it should, and why do you think? And his answer was, my Cartier Curation doesn't get much wear, and I think it's because of the size and how delicate I feel like it is. Well, I think, Nevo, that if it were the size, if it were more the size than how delicate it is, you wouldn't have bought it to begin with, because that's usually a non-starter for people. People that aren't comfortable with small watches. I've never met a watch collector that tried on a small watch, bought it, wore it, and then found it was too small. Right? I know people that from day one knew it was too small for them and then never bought it. That I know. But anyone that I know that's actually worn small watches comes around to it because they're incredibly comfortable and beautiful, and there's something very charming about them, very old world and charming about them. So I think it's more about your perception of how delicate it is. And it is delicate. I mean, it's a rare antique from 70 years ago. I mean, it is. I mean, it is 80 years ago. It is delicate. But it's not as delicate as you think, I think. You're not playing baseball. You're not exposing it to significant shock. You're not swimming. What are you doing? What do you do, Nevo? I think you can wear this watch a lot harder than you do. I think you could put this watch on almost any time. I really do. I think that you can wear this watch formally. I think you wear it casually with a t-shirt. I think you can do a lot more with this watch than you think. And before you sell it, and it does represent a lot of money, and that's a big part of this conversation, because where the money is, right, and if it's in somewhere where you don't want it to be, informs your future budget, which we'll talk about, right? His budget, we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm not saying you should keep it forever, because it represents enough money, somewhere between $12,000 and $17,000, let's say, that could be put elsewhere. I get that, right? But I think you'll come around to it. I think with values and where they're going, you might regret selling it if you do, because I do think rare and collectible Cartier has a beautiful future. Next question: are you open to precious metal? He said yes, absolutely. Next question: what are your case size guidelines? He says, I'm open to any case size. I'm a Cartier guy, and that is still considering a Ploprof, right? An Omega. That is funny. I love that. I love someone very much like the Ralph Lauren identity, right? To, wear a denim jacket and jeans and cowboy boots and a, sort of old sweater on a horse on a Monday, and then wear an incredible, perfectly tailored Italian, banker suit on a Friday. Right? I love the idea of the duality and having fun. I think that watches are a beautiful way to play dress up. That's how I look at them, generally speaking. And I like how open you are. Next, what is your budget for your next piece? His answer was, ideally under $30,000, but same as your dad, referencing the previous episode, I would like to spend more one day. Well, $30,000 is a ton of money. God bless you, Nevo. And it's also, it could be a lot more money if in theory, or hurt less, right? If you were to liquidate something, which we'll discuss in a second. And the next is, name a watch that you'd absolutely love to own, but think might be out of the reach of your allocated budget. He said a Patek Philippe 3800 steel with a dark blue dial. Now those watches are about $50,000. I remember when they were 25, and many of my friends wanted them and didn't buy them. Really only one. You know what I'm talking about. But it's a $50,000 watch, which is considerably over his $30,000 budget. It could be made possible with some liquidation, even barring the rest of the saving aspect. You could always just save more money. Clearly, you make enough money that you can save more money. And I do think that everyone should, if they can, everyone should, if they can, own their Grail watch someday, and everyone should, do everything within their power responsibly to own that, right? And if it never can happen, like my Grail watch, I don't know what it is, but if it's a 5004 Patek Philippe, by the time that I would do it, it'd probably be $500,000, and maybe that would still be out of my budget. I think that's fairly, likely. I think I would feel like an idiot wearing a $500,000 watch. How much money do you need to be worth for a $500,000 watch? Without looking like a total schmuck, And if I did have that watch, I would make fun of myself all the time to anyone that noticed. They'd be like, "Oh wow, great 5004." I'm like, I'm only this much richer than this watch costs, is what I would tell people. I'd be so embarrassed, Please don't let this watch fool you. I'm actually not doing very well, relatively speaking. Anyway, so Patek 3800 dark blue dial, $50,000. You can actually do it. You can liquidate your, you could do the 30,000 plus your Ballon Bleu, and a little bit of savings. The rest of the stuff I really wouldn't sell. I think it's all great. I mean, unless something really, unless you're not wearing something, where's redundancy? I could imagine you're doing without your reverso. I love the watch, but I could see because it's a little bit redundant, right? With the Paris tank, obviously. I could also see you doing without the Paris tank because the Breguet achieves the same goal, and I think it's even more interesting. So there's probably $15,000 to $18,000 of watches in your current collection that you can already liquidate to add on top of your $30,000 budget, and you can get to 50 really without saving much more. And if a little bit, maybe. So your Grail watch is actually, or your next watch really is actually within possibility, but that's the easy answer. I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to recommend a couple of watches that I think are even more interesting, or watches that you didn't mention that I think are less expensive, and you wouldn't, right? You wouldn't be tempted to think about liquidation in order to get into them, although liquidation is always a good idea. The first one, Vacheron Overseas. There are quite a few variations of the Vacheron Overseas, which led into the 222 or the revival of the 222, obviously. Or the 222 was the original, right? The original design, that I think are really valuable, all in the 20s and up to, $35,000, depending on complication, but no chronograph or with chronograph. And I think these watches, again, would be a little bit redundant with your Ballon Bleu, sure, but now we're talking about a different level of watchmaking. Now we're in Holy Trinity watchmaking. We're in really significant, right, design watchmaking, right, important watches. The Overseas first generation, on bracelet and everything. And by the way, you could do this in a later generation on a strap, which are also great and within the same price point, and they're more modern. And if you wear a Rolex Sprite, I imagine you'd be fairly comfortable with this as well, right? It's a modern sports watch, but in precious metal, which I know that you like. And maybe if you did that, maybe now you're really looking at getting rid of the reverso, because you're really pretty close on redundancy there, right? Pretty close. You already have a dress watch. You don't need, no one needs anything, but you don't need another one, right? And the Vacheron Overseas, in gold would scratch quite a few of those itches, right? It'd be the reverso, and when it couldn't be, you have your Breguet to be the reverso to step in for the dress. Anyway, a lot going on here, okay? I also think that a Cartier Panthère is a really interesting watch at $15,000. I know that you like Cartier, and I think that you would appreciate it. I think that these watches are a little underappreciated by men. They're definitely appreciated by women. I think it is more of a feminine design. I think the Panthère is inherently softer than the Santos, which is its sibling. And I think that soft lines are generally, right, more appealing or more, associated with feminine design. But I think it's fantastic. I think it's really great. I also think, as a side note, I know I've said this before on YouTube, I think that in Wall Street with Gordon Gekko, him wearing the Santos Carré, which is a watch that I own, and Bud Fox wearing the Panthère, I believe that was actually a bit of foreshadowing as to the character of the two men, that one was softer than the other, but they both were wearing these gold Cartiers, but their choice of them represented or told a story that you would find unravel in the film, but I think it told it way earlier. I think that I'm right about that. Anyway, around $15,000, you can get a precious metal, yellow gold, specifically Cartier Panthère, that I think is really interesting if you don't go the route of Vacheron, which is a lot more money, of course. I also think another brand and watch that you should really consider, keeping within the right idea that you really do like the 3800, is the IWC Ingenieur. These are really beautiful watches. They are undervalued. And I think IWC as a general class when it comes to precious metal is undervalued. Generally speaking, mechanical watches, sometimes you get these mecha quartz watches as well. Obviously, Ingenieur line. You can also go into the Pilot double chrono line. Now, that's decidedly sporty, but clearly you have a taste for watches that are weird. You have no problem going off the beaten path, right? And I think that that's another piece that you could really consider. These are watches, the IWC, the IWC precious metal category, the Cartier Panthère as it pertains to men, and the Vacheron world, the precious metal Vacheron overseas world. These are spaces people aren't talking about. Generally speaking, people aren't looking at precious metal as often as they should be, right? The premium on precious metal is not as large as people think. It's not, because that is in large part because the depreciation is crazy, and also the appreciation of the steel is insane. People have overvalued steel watches so much that the delta is just not that significant. Precious metal, high quality, interesting, often rare because they had to be produced in lower quantities because fewer people could afford them, right? Those watches are weird and they're interesting and they're beautiful. I think that more people ought to be looking at them, including you, Nevo. So these are the watches that I'm looking at. These are the watches I recommend. I don't think you should give up on your 3800. I think that this conversation is in many ways kind of full circle because your hunch that that's a watch that you dream of owning, I don't think you should deviate from it completely. Don't get too emotional about these big value pieces because they can ultimately end up standing in the way between you and a watch that you really, really want, right? When you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars, your Nomos sale isn't going to make a big difference, right, in your collection. So if there's emotionality there, that's fine. But something like something like a Ballon Bleu or something like the Sprite or something like your Day-Date. I mean, these watches have a lot of value, right? They represent a big chunk, a big steps on the way to the piece that you, or the piece or pieces that you really, really want. So consider that. Consider not one in, one out per se. It could be 2 out, 1 in. It could be 3 out, 1 in, maybe less, less and better could be the message here. But you're doing an amazing job. Your collection is fantastic. I really, really appreciate you, Nevo, for taking the time to send in your collection. So many of you did. We're still working through them. We are giving priority to our members at the Zero. So people who are Zero members and are on that podcast community, we are being a little bit preferential to. But everyone, please send in. I promise we're going to be doing a ton of these. I'm thinking, 1 to 2 per month, and this is a blast. Like I sat down for an hour and worked on this episode and the outline, and I actually had fun. Like, this was a fun thing, and I'm glad that that's not lost from this channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and that's it. Head on over to the Theo and Harris shop and explore our vintage watches, and I'll see you all very soon.